Gospel according to John, the 11th chapter. Glory to you, O God. This is another long reading, so what I'm going to try and do is tell you the story and leave a whole bunch out. And we'll talk about a part of the Gospel in the midst of the sermon. This was at a time that Jesus had just recently been in Jerusalem, and the leaders of the church were so angry with him, they started to get ready to stone him, and he and his disciples had left Jerusalem and had gone over to the other side of the Jordan. And they had a friend named Lazarus, his sisters Mary and Martha, who lived in Bethany, just outside of Jerusalem, and Lazarus became ill. And the sisters sent a message to Jesus that said, "Lord, the one whom you love is ill." Now Jesus told his disciples that this was not all that bad of an illness that Lazarus had. So they stayed there across the Jordan for 2 more days. And then Jesus told his disciples, it's time for us to go back to Judea. And the disciples had a little bit of an argument with him about going back where it wasn't safe. But he said, our friend Lazarus has gone to sleep. And they had a little bit of a going back and forth about the going to sleep. And he finally said, he's dead. And so they went back towards Bethany. And as they got close to the town of Bethany, Martha heard that Jesus was there, and she came out and she met him, and she said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Yet I know that the Lord will give you whatever you ask. And she and Jesus had a great conversation, which we're going to go over later, about the rising of Lazarus and faith and who Jesus is. And as Martha finished her conversation with Jesus, she left and went back to the house, and Mary came out to see Jesus. And she knelt at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And there were many Jews from Jerusalem and Bethany that were with her as she came out to see Jesus. And they were all crying. And Jesus asked, where have you laid him? And then Jesus began to weep right along with them. And they went to the place where Lazarus had been buried or entombed, because it was a cave with a stone over the opening in the cave. And Jesus asked them, move the stone, please. But Martha said, Lord, he's been dead for 4 days and it reeks in there. So he was not only dead, but he was stinking dead. And so they rolled away the stone. And Jesus said a prayer to his Father in heaven. And then he cried out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out! And the man came out with bands of cloth wrapped around his head and his feet and his hands. And Jesus said, unbind him and let him be free. And because of what he had done that day, many of the Jews who were there began to believe in him. The gospel of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Now, we are obviously living in a time that is unique. We are living in a time that I can't imagine, other than maybe the Japanese internment camps, that this nation has been through such a time. And many of us are simply bored to tears because we're not allowed to be out. Some of us are filled with anxiety. Some of us, like me, are just plain tired of washing my hands. I think they're pruned permanently. Some of us are living in fear, especially those that have underlying conditions that might make this COVID-19 more dangerous. And some of us are simply fed up with the whole thing and ready to get back to normal life. We're tired of the same old thing day after day, and we're tired of hearing of the sorrow and pain of people who are living with this disease. By the way, I have called everybody this week, and everybody in our immediate church family is doing well. Pastor Jim Fuller from Our Saviors, before they closed, recently retired, believes that he has COVID-19. He hasn't been tested yet, but we keep Jim in our prayers, and we especially keep his wife Nancy, who does have underlying conditions, in our prayers. So Mary and Martha, they were experiencing extreme sorrow and pain. You see, they knew Jesus well, and they knew him well enough to know that he could have come and healed Lazarus had he wanted to. That's why they sent the message to him, Lord, the one who you love is ill. And yet, Jesus didn't come, and Lazarus died. In the Hebrew world, what were these two women going to do now? Who was going to protect them? How were they going to get through life without a man? Now, don't blame that on me. That's the Hebrew world at the time. But that's what it was. Women were essentially not allowed to care for themselves, although this seemed to be a rather well-to-do family, so maybe they would be okay. With their brother dead and Jesus on the outskirts of the town, both of them came and used the very same words when they first saw Jesus. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. You see, one of the things that we have to interpret as we read a story like this is, was that line, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died, was that said in anger? Was it said in anguish? Was it said just in pure pain? When I read it, I can feel the anguish, and I can feel the pain, and I can feel maybe some anger. For you see, they were all too human, just like us. And it seems like Jesus had let them down. Now, I am convinced that Jesus never, ever wants us to experience pain and sorrow. Never does he want us to experience suffering, yet we all do, because it's part of living in this world. Now, from this story, I'm most interested in that conversation that Jesus and Martha had that I didn't quote perfectly. Well, I just kind of left it out when I went through the Gospels. So that'll give me a click there. Martha came out to see Jesus. And she said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask. And Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." And Jesus shocked her by saying, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said, "Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." What a statement of faith. Can we, you and I, say the same thing that Martha said when Jesus was standing outside of the village of Bethany? Well, we can, and we do. Every Sunday, when we recite the Creed, whether it's the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed like we're doing through Lent, we profess our faith. And we, like Martha, are able to say, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." Martha believed in who Jesus is. She believed that Jesus can turn the world upside down. And she believed that Jesus was going to do that. And they went to the place where Lazarus was buried. And he called, "Lazarus, come out." And Lazarus was raised to life. So how are we going to incorporate this story and our faith confession into our lives this week? There's no doubt that our lives are different. But when we do get a chance to go out, whether it's to the grocery store, the pharmacy, or the doctor, be gentle, be kind, and be thankful. And I want to encourage you to tell people, "God bless you." Let them know in that small way that you are a follower of Christ. Say, "God bless you." And take care of each other. I know you're already doing it, but call one another. Be that friend on the phone. Keep track of each other, and if you find that somebody needs something that you can't get for them, let me know. And we will find a way to get whatever they need. And then take care of your spiritual life. We've been talking about it as we've been doing these videos. Keep reading your daily devotions. This is a great little booklet, the Word in Season. It has a verse and a devotion and a prayer for every day. If you need one, let us know and we will find a way to get it to you. And then read your Bible more than you have in the past because you have time to do it now. Last week I gave you 3 books to read: Ruth and Job and Romans. And that was a lot of reading. But I know some of you read all 3 of those. This week I'm going to suggest just one book, the Gospel of John. John is different than the other gospel readers. John has a more spiritual look at things and may give you a boost this week. That would be my prayer. And know that God still turns things upside down. He turns them upside down when we least expect it. No one in the scene from the gospel story today expected Lazarus to come out of that cave. And yet he did. Jesus will somehow turn this pandemic upside down. I don't know how, but I believe that he will. Amen.